Woman was about to be hanged for being too savage, until a rancher said, "My kid needs a mother." The dusty frontier town gathered at high noon, the crowd restless as they pushed forward to see the grim spectacle in the square. A woman bound at the wrists, her dark hair tangled, her face streaked with dirt but her eyes burning with a wild, unbroken fire. Standing tall on the gallows despite the noose dangling just inches from her head, whispers spread that she had been living with the Comanche, that she fought like a man and refused to bow like a lady, and the town had branded her savage, deciding that such a woman had no place among them, and so they sentenced her to hang as an example, though not one of them could say she had truly committed a crime worthy of death. Children clung to their mothers, men spit tobacco, and the sheriff, weary from years of half-justice, read the charges with a heavy drawl. The woman's lips trembled, but no plea for mercy came, only a fierce silence, as if she dared the world to do its worst. But just as the hangman's hand reached for the lever, a deep voice cut through the crowd, steady as steel and raw with urgency. "Stop right there. I'll take her." All eyes turned, and there he was, Jed Carter, the lonely rancher, broad-shouldered with a dust-stained hat pulled low, holding the small hand of his daughter, a girl no older than 6, whose innocent eyes fixed on the condemned woman with a kind of unexplainable wonder. "You can't mean that, Jed," someone muttered. But the rancher stepped forward, unflinching. "My kid needs a mother," he said plain and clear, his words carrying more weight than a sermon. And though the crowd erupted in disbelief, murmurs rising like a storm, Jed's stare never wavered from the woman on the gallows. For 15 long years he had lived widowed, his heart scarred and his ranch lonely. But when his daughter tugged his sleeve that morning and whispered, "Daddy, she looks like she needs us," something inside him broke free. The sheriff studied him, the townsfolk jeered. But slowly, reluctantly, the noose was lifted from her neck, the rope cast aside. The woman stumbled, breath ragged, staring at Jed with equal parts suspicion and shock, unable to believe her life had been spared by the mercy of a stranger. And as Jed reached out a hand to steady her, the story of 2 broken souls and 1 small child began to unfold, a story the frontier would never forget. The ride back to Jed Carter's ranch was long and quiet, the clatter of hooves echoing through the wide plains as the rescued woman sat stiffly in the wagon, her hands still raw from the ropes that had bound her, her eyes darting toward the man who had bought her life with a single sentence, suspicion written in every line of her face. Jed kept his gaze on the horizon, his jaw set, though inside his mind wrestled with doubt. What sort of man invites a woman the town calls savage into his home, especially when he has a young daughter to protect? But then his little girl, Sarah, broke the silence with the bright laughter only a child can carry, tugging at the woman's sleeve and whispering, "You don't look scary to me. You look like an angel." And something in the woman's eyes softened for the first time, as if the weight of every cruel name and every judgment she had carried cracked just slightly under the innocence of a child's heart. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was dipping low, painting the fields in fire and gold, and Jed helped her down, though she pulled back from his touch, her pride refusing pity. Inside the cabin, Sarah ran to fetch water, insisting their guest wash up. And though the woman hesitated, finally she knelt by the basin, scrubbing years of dust and blood from her skin, revealing beneath the grime a face both fierce and hauntingly beautiful, the kind of beauty forged in hardship, not vanity. Jed watched quietly, remembering the last time a woman's presence had filled this space, and his heart ached with memories he had buried deep. That night at supper, the woman who at last spoke her name, Elena, ate cautiously, as though unsure if this was a trick. But Sarah chatted enough for all 3 of them, her laughter echoing in the rafters and weaving a fragile thread between strangers. Later, when the child had drifted to sleep, Elena stood at the door, staring into the dark, and whispered, "Why did you save me?" Jed didn't answer right away, his voice finally rough when it came. "Because my little girl asked me to, and because no one deserves a rope for being different." She turned her face toward him then, fire and tears mingling in her eyes, and though neither of them spoke again that night, both felt the shift in the air, the first fragile step of 2 souls circling the idea of trust, each one as afraid of it as they were in need of it. The days that followed were a test of willpower, patience, and something neither Jed nor Elena could name, for though he had opened his door to her, she carried herself like a wild creature too long caged, pacing the edges of the ranch as though always ready to flee, her her sharp eyes catching every shadow, every shift of wind, while Jed worked the cattle and mended fences, trying to pretend life was as steady as before. Yet in truth, nothing felt the same, because every time he glanced toward the house and saw Sarah skipping at Elena's side, or heard laughter that had been absent for years, the hollow in his chest filled a little more, though he fought it hard, reminding himself that she was a stranger with a past no one fully knew. Trouble brewed, soon enough when word spread across town that Jed Carter had taken in the savage woman, who was meant to hang. Neighbors muttered that he had lost his senses, some even threatened to ride out and set things right, and Jed found himself squaring his shoulders not just against cattle, rustlers, but against his own kind, defending the woman whose life he had claimed. And when one drunken ranch hand spat in the dirt at his feet, sneering that a man like him had no business raising a child around such filth, Jed's fist came down like thunder, leaving the man sprawled in the dust. And though violence wasn't Jed's way, his blood ran hot at anyone daring to speak of her that way. Back at the ranch, Elena tried to hide her trembling hands as she stitched Sarah's doll back together with a scrap of cloth, her voice low when she said, "You shouldn't fight their battles, rancher. I've fought enough to know hate never ends." And Jed's gaze lingered on her, softer now, answering, "Some battles are worth fighting." And the silence between them carried more weight than words. That night, when coyotes prowled too close to the barn, it was Elena who grabbed a lantern and strode into the dark, her courage as fierce as any man's, and Jed found himself running after her, not to stop her, but to stand beside her. And as they chased the beasts away, the firelight flickering across her face, he saw not a savage, not a victim, but a woman of grit and spirit, someone who had survived the worst and still stood tall. Later, when Sarah wrapped her small arms around Elena's waist and mumbled sleepily, "Good night, Mama," Jed's chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. For though the word had slipped innocently from a child's lips, it spoke the truth of what was already growing among them, a bond forged not by law or blood, but by need, trust, and the quiet stirrings of love neither of them dared confess. The storm came not with rain, but with men, a band of townsfolk riding out under the cover of night, their torches casting cruel light against the wide sky as they thundered toward Jed Carter's ranch, shouting that no savage woman would live among decent folk. And Jed, roused from sleep, grabbed his rifle and stood firm at the door, his daughter still dreaming in her bed while Elena stood beside him, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes blazing with the same wild fire that had once condemned her. The men demanded he send her out, claimed she was a danger, a curse, but Jed's voice cut through their anger like a blade. "The only danger here is a town too blind to see the truth. She's not savage. She's the bravest woman I've ever known. And she's the one who saved my child from growing up motherless." And when they sneered, ready to push forward, Elena stepped into the lantern light, lifting her chin as she told them of her years in captivity, of the cruelty she endured, and the strength she found to survive, her words sharper than steel. And for the first time the men faltered, uneasy before the truth of her spirit. Yet one raised his gun, drunk with hate. And in that instant Jed moved like lightning, knocking the weapon away, his fists and rifle stock meeting fury with fury until the mob, shamed and beaten back, retreated into the night, their torches dwindling like the last breath of prejudice. When the dust settled, Jed stood bleeding from a cut across his brow, and Elena, shaking, pressed her hands to his face, whispering, "Why risk everything for me?" His reply was low but steady. "Because Sarah was right. You were meant to be here. Not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as her mother and my wife." The silence that followed was broken only by Sarah's small footsteps as she ran to them, clutching Elena's skirt and looking up with sleepy eyes that held all the innocence of truth. Tears filled Elena's eyes then, for the first time, not from fear but from hope, and she leaned into Jed, her lips meeting his in a kiss that sealed not just their fates but their healing, two broken souls finding wholeness beneath the wide Montana sky. And from that day forward, the ranch that had once echoed with loneliness rang with laughter and love, proof that sometimes the most condemned hearts are the ones most worth saving. Dear viewers, if this story of courage, redemption, and unexpected love touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because more powerful, Wild West stories like this one are waiting for you. Tales of grit, sacrifice, and love where you least expect it. Subscribe today, saddle up, and ride with us into the next unforgettable adventure.